The thought in arranging for the following transcription was the first-class practitioner of public relations would be in excellent position to survey a whole complex of areas otherwise unrelated. As things turned out, the practitioner, or counselor, had an impressive collection of the Deminded of his own, peculiar to his field and virtually invisible from any other point of view. To obtain this valuable material, the research assistant merely telephoned and identified herself as a research scholar. Immediately, an appointment was set up at a restaurant called the Four Winds, a ritual gathering place for the profession. After about 3 hours of what we analyzed it at the laboratory we could only call trivia, the discourse became relevant. At least the original muckrakers had something specific to rake up in the muck. Spoiled beef is no joke, and neither are adulterated drugs. There was a goal for that old muckraking, the Federal Food and Drugs Act. Good idea, and incidentally, good public relations. Should have had it years before. But what is it do these people want? To pass a law against public relations? Well, out of the question. The effort would take the expert service of too many public relations men. Well, let's face it. If these writers knew anything at all about public relations, they wouldn't be writing about it. They'd be practicing it. All these carping critics are very strong on making the image and manipulating public opinion and all that, but there's never a word about the good things public relations men do for the country. It's high time public relations had better public relations. Actually, we're making important contributions to the general welfare, but no one knows about them because we only speak for clients, and the clients are always trying to pretend we don't exist at all. But look at the press. Can you imagine what the daily newspaper would be writing without public relations? It would hardly exist. Advertising men, who are always trying to run us down too, tell you that advertising is what makes the press possible. In a way, it's true. Ads prove the income that keeps the papers in business, but income isn't enough. You need stories to fill in the spaces between the ads, and that's where we come in. Every day, all across this land, the public relations contact men out into the offices of the American press, into the great metropolitan dailies and the country weeklies, to the wire service and the syndicated columnists. They bring with them the news you'll be reading the next day or next week. They bring with them your freedom, since that freedom depends on a free press, and the press depends on your handouts to stay in business. Lex, I often think, is one of the most important things in life for most of us. Yet how much realize much of their leisure experience comes from the determined efforts of the PR men to keep the press free. I would estimate handoff, or that in the stories brought to the press each day by the army of dedicated public relations men, about 92% somehow are connected with the photograph of a pretty girl in a bathing suit. When it comes to making a contribution to the continuity of society, how fundamental can you get? Finally, public relations supports the press through reporters. Reporters are often thought of as an apprentice to PR men, and so they are, but they also play a much more distinct role of maintaining the freedom of the press. Advertising does indeed subsidize the press through the big spending brought on by the 15% commission system of the agencies, but a more immediate subsidy is that donated by reporters in the form of low wages. This condition of theirs makes reporters particularly receptive to free drinks, free meals, big parties, and little mementos of happy relations. Many a front-page story began when a reporter on the take meets PR on the make. Public relations is usually thought of as an adjunct to the business and industrial community. It is that, of course, but I and many practitioners like to feel that we play a somewhat civic-minded role, more or less, in the total community than, say, our brothers in the advertising business. Their only function is to push the product, to get out there and sell. I think they themselves realize the difference, and that realization behind the rather resentful attitude towards public relations often encounters among admin, as in advertisement men. We in the profession, on the other hand, are more concerned with the relativity entangled task of celebrating and creating and maintaining a friendly feeling for the client and, by association, for his product. Unless the reader or the viewer of an ad actually buys the product, the advertisement man has failed. We in public relations count our effort success if we simply introduce and induce in the audience a warm, pleasant feeling towards the client. Sometimes, indeed, we are successful if our efforts simply avoid creating antagonism. In no area of American life can we take more justified pride in our work than in our tremendous contribution to the prosperity of traditional American institutions. I'm not talking about persuading clients to write out a check for the Red Cross. That's important too, as long as the local Red Cross people understand it is the practitioner who has activated the gift. I'm thinking rather of such things as clubs and societies formed by the American woman to occupy their leisure hours, of which, in each day, she has approximately 24. In chronicles of times past, we read about women similarly studied, and while we sympathized, we can hardly approve of the activities they chose for themselves. They are solitaries to a large extent, and when they are broke, their solitude is generally to commit adultery. And how much happier things are today. The modern woman of leisure is nothing long enough to form a dangerous liaison. For this we must thank her clubs and activities, and they in turn must thank public relations. American women's husbands, as an industrial executive, frequently makes his public relation counselor available to his wife's organization, whereupon they go into high gear. More directly, public relations has created complete programs from illustrated lectures on detergents to seminars on beauty care, all designed to keep today's clubwoman wholesomely occupied. In exceptional cases, we have even brought whole women's clubs into existence to achieve some special end, often legislative, and these, as you might expect, are the most active of all. With children, too, the professions have been no less a source of rich benefit, not to speak of educational films turning the minds of the young towards the path of enlightened consumership, not to speak of the carloads of free balloons and bubble gum that annually add a sparkle to a child's smile. Let us consider only the profession's contribution to today's youngster as a social being, or, as he has been called, the organization kid. With woman's life so thoroughly and so admirably organized, it follows that the children's lives must follow the same patterns, particularly in this age of rising pay and shrinking force of domestic servants. If a woman is out on her rounds when school is over for the day, some provisions must be made for the children, or they will come home and wreak heaven and havoc. Wreak heaven only knows what damage on the account of accoutrements of the gracious living. Yep. Hence, children's organization. Also, of course, as preparation for their own adulthood. Noting only that public relations has created out of nothing the entire Little League movement as a place where the organization women can watch their organization kids in action. I would like to speak most fully of the Boy Scouts of America and their upgrading due to the public relations. This estimatable organization came into being, as nearly as I can discover, like most youth organizations, as a course of study in skills and attitudes that would be useful when the child becomes an adult. Thus the child was taught how, if in the woods, he would find his direction from the moss and the stars. He could build a fire to keep himself warm, and he could leave messages of stones for any search party out looking for him. Clearly such skills were valuable in the primitive society that gave birth to the Scouts. Without such skills, the young boy once lost would have never or ever lost forever been, forever lost, chilled to the bone, unguided and unheard of. Times changed, however. The modern child does not get lost in the woods for the excellent reason that there are no more woods. If he is cold, he turns up the thermostat. If he has a message, he calls up the recipient on the phone. And there are even cases of adolescents, both sexes, using that device when they don't have a message. For quite a few years, therefore, the Boy Scouts languished for the lack of purpose beyond the sale of brownish clothing and the endless impediments that hook onto belts and traps and straps. Into this organizational vacuum came PR with its healing balm. Before we could say skit, scat, scout, we had all those little waifs lined up making field trips to the factories of our clients. They're still in it and still at it, and there's no identification that they're ever tired of it. As usual in our profession, everyone benefits. The boys are kept occupied, their mothers don't have to worry about them, and the PR man at the end of every month has an impressive figure of visitors to show the client. In the age of automation now dawning, it may even be that someday soon the only voices heard in the great production centers will be those of the touring scouts saying, "Oh," and "Ah," and "Where's the toilet?" It may be, too, that the age of automation will bring on the greatest challenge and the greatest opportunity the profession has ever faced. Any public relation man worth his salt will tell you, in strict confidence, that the greatest hazard to his work is the client himself. It is not only that the client is basically suspicious of public relations and is constantly looking for results, hence the value of all those Boy Scouts, but even more fundamentally, the client would have not hired a PR man in the first place unless he needed him, and he wouldn't have needed him if he weren't such a thoroughly reprehensible character himself. Stingy, usually, wholly centered on his profits and products, the type with a knack for attracting the hostility of customers, colleagues, competitors, and employees with complete impartiality. The trouble is that although this is true, and he knows it's true or he wouldn't have hired us, he nevertheless wants to dabble in PR himself. either proposing inexpensive projects that shout their cheapness to the world or vetoing the most imaginative schemes the practitioner can come up with, and almost always on the grounds of cost. Dickens managed to turn Scrooge into a kindly old gentleman, but Dickens was a great literary artist, and no PR man is Tiny Tim. You break your heart building the Santa Claus image anyway, most of our popular models, and every time the uninformed Scrooge sticks his head out from underneath the beard and spits in the public, you've just related him to... Automation is our big chance. You can't automize public relations. It's an instinct. But you can automatize management decision making. When management is a machine, we can still be there, feeding the input and guiding the output. Then at least we'll have an image worth making.